Okay, class lecture number 5. Last time we were together, we talked about politics, mostly for the class period. I mentioned to you about the presidential election of 1876. And, of course, Rutherford B. Hayes won that presidential election, where I think probably Samuel J. Tilden, by all rights, should have been the president of the United States. And with that, we'll see a break in the Republican Party. Not a serious rift, if you will, but they divided into two different groups, the stalwarts, and we also had the half-breeds. You can look up the definitions if you wish to do so. And in the 1880 presidential election, James A. Garfield from Ohio was elected president, and of course 4 months into his inauguration, or 4 months after his inauguration, he was assassinated, and or I should say he was grievously injured, and he would subsequently die in September, and of course that took place on the 2nd of July, 1881, in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, the person that did this was Charles Guiteau. I hope you looked at the documentary on him on the little included video. And we also talked about Chester A. Arthur. Arthur now became president. I am a stalwart, and Arthur is now president. And not really a remarkable president, I don't think, anyway. And from there, we moved into the presidential election. 1884, Grover Cleveland won that presidential election against the Plume Knight from Maine and James G. Blaine. Unfortunately, Grover Cleveland, unfortunately for the Democrats, lost the presidential election in 1888 under Benjamin Harrison, but unfortunately for the Republicans, in 1892, Grover Cleveland was reelected. All righty, somewhere through here, we went through Farmers Alliances. I think I briefly mentioned to you about the Grangers first, and then the Farmers Alliances. Make sure that you can recognize Mary Elizabeth Lease, the Kansas Cyclone. And from there, we talked about the worst depression in the history of the United States to that date. Anyway, we'll find a couple more later that will be more serious than that, but the Panic of 1893. All righty, of course, the president will get the blame for that, but the president claimed that it was instability in the currencies here. And we went into the, shall we say, the ratio of 16 to 1 was silver to gold, which became the basis for the presidential election of 1896. And in 1896, William McKinley, the Republican, was running against the boy orator of Platt, or I guess you should say it should be the other way around there, the great commoner William Jennings Bryan. And it really wasn't that close of a presidential election landslide, but nevertheless it was not closely tied either. And William McKinley wins that presidential election. All right, now what I want to do here, folks, we're going to go into our next chapter here. And whereas last time we were together, we dealt mostly with politics, now we're going to go to the city. We're going to see what's taking place there. A lot of good things ahead of you here, particularly that of sports. I'm not a real sports person. In fact, I'm not a sports person at all. But some of you are, and perhaps you'll appreciate that. So anyway, let me just tell you this as we go into the section here on the cities. Cities are going to greatly increase their population. I'll go through some of these numbers in just a few minutes and explain to you why these cities are increasing in their population. And in fact, so many people are moving to the large cities here. This put a serious strain upon things such as sewer systems, government services here, transportation, just public housing, and it was just, we had overcrowded cities. That's just basically what it was. On the other hand, the cities had more to offer. You had cultural enhancements there. We also had entertainment that you could find in the cities here. Indoor plumbing, which often you did not find that out in the rural environments. And there was just many things that you could have that were to your advantage in the cities, to include public transportation like trolleys. And I'm going to tell you about trolleys in just a few minutes. So anyway, let's go over to our document camera here, folks, and let's pick up some information with this. And looking at the population of New York City in 1860, New York City had a population of 1 million. By 1900, New York City had a population of 3 million. So we was going to triple in size in a matter of 40 years. For Chicago, even more amazing, in Chicago, in 1860, it had a population of 100,000, but by 1900, it had a population of 1 million. And it seems like every weekend, the population of Chicago is declining. Oops, I should not have said that, but it is the truth here, folks. So, where are these people coming from? Well, before I get to that, let me share a couple of things with you. And this is on page 489 in your current edition of your textbook. And notice here the population increase here in the United States from 1860 to 1900 is gradually moving up there. And let's take a look also at the immigrant population in this chart here, in this little graph here. And you can see the immigrant population is greatly adding to the regular population that we have in the country. Now, what I want to do here, folks, let's go over here to the next page. And I want you to spend some time with this now. And it shows you where people are coming from in this pie graph here, and you can see that mostly these people are coming from England and Ireland and Germany. All right, we have Ireland here, and this is the British here, and we have Germany here. All right, and that's the way it was at first. And I'm going to change that just a little bit in just a second here, folks. But let's go back to our camera, and let's see some of the notes I put out for you good folks. From 1865 to 1915, we had 25 million immigrants to enter into this country. That's absolutely unbelievable here. My family was part of this. Part of my family came from England. Much of my family came from Ireland. Much of my family came from Wales, which Wales is technically England anyway. And for the first few years, first 20 years or so, from 1870 to 1890 anyway, as we said a few seconds ago, these immigrants arrived from England and Ireland and Northern Europe, particularly that of Germany. But from the period of 1890 on up to about 1915, we're going to see it change a little bit. We still have a lot coming in from England and Ireland, and more people are coming in from other places in Europe, such as Italians, and we have Poles, from Poland obviously, Russians, Greeks, Slavs, and we had over 1 million Mexicans to enter into this country legally, and that's not illegally. All right, now I want to share some photographs. We've got a bunch of these photographs, and I got a lot of visuals for you folks today, and we have a short amount of time to go through this, so let me share a few things with you here. Some of you, perhaps, if you've been to New York, you recognize this place here. Look at New York, Manhattan in the background. But the place I'm talking about here is right here. And where that is, if I can quit shaking these photographs here, and by the way, if we back up a little bit, you can see the Statue of Liberty, which if you're an immigrant coming into our country, that's going to be, and you're on a ship, that'll probably be the first structure you actually see in your new home, the United States of America. And that place, by the way, is called Ellis Island. Ellis Island. Some of you perhaps have been there. All right, so let's run through these, and here we go. We'll get it right in just a second here. And some of these are photographs from that period of time of these individuals coming into the country, an Italian family here. And you can see that they have their worldly goods with them. There's nothing else. I don't see a father figure there. I do see a young boy there holding a toddler that looks like he could be able to walk on his own, but that probably was an unkind thing to say. And let's see a few other photographs that we have here. And here we go. Finally got this together here. This group of ladies, they are from Guadalupe. From Guadalupe, that's one of the Caribbean islands, by the way. Do you think they're going to blend very easily into the streets of New York, into the street life of New York? I don't think so. Dressed like that anyway. And let's see who else we have. This Ruthenian lady here. And I ask you the same question. Do you think she's going to assimilate very well in the streets of New York? Or probably not. Dressed like that anyway. And these little Dutch children here, aren't they cute? These little Dutch children. All right, and here we go. We'll try to get this here. Another Italian family coming in on the docks here at Ellis Island. And you can imagine this. You don't speak the language. You don't eat the American food here. It's going to be a really, really big transition. Who's going to take care of you? And I'll answer that question in just a little bit here. Let's take a look at the deck of the ship here, one of these transportation ships. If you do research on this, you'll find that there are just thousands of these ships that actually brought passengers. It's almost impossible to trace your heritage on which ship they actually arrived on unless somebody kept some detailed notes on that. But the deck is packed there. Okay, here we have a family here, an Italian family, that are on the rails there of the ship, preparing to enter their newborn land. People lined up here, and these people which have identification tags, because many of them do not speak English. And, of course, what you find is that these identification tags will identify you by name, and often we get corruptions of these names here. A ship that is arriving from Hamburg, Germany, for example, here, and an individual's name is Schmidt, and the official immigration official there writes it down as Smith, and so we get a name change. And for my family, my name is Roland, of course, and my family originally, when they lived in Ireland, it was Rollins. And I did not mean to say Ireland, I meant to say Wales. It was Rollins with an S. But when they arrived here, somehow the S was dropped here. Okay, so moving on here, folks, and let's see some other photographs that we have. Preparing for going through immigration or actually customs. I don't know if you folks have ever been out of the country and had to go through United States Customs. It is not a pleasant thing. Here you are completely at the mercy of the customs officials. We have cursory examinations on these individuals, make sure they don't have trachoma, an infection of the eye, and your worst fears if you're going to be turned back and you have to go back to the country in which you departed from. You can see your life, your hands are in the fate, and in the hands of this individual, this customs individual right here. You see the trepidation in this woman's eyes here. Just please let me go. Just please let me go through. Again, more photographs of that period of time. All right, you will also be given a little physical examination, a little auscultation and percussion here. Here we have a group of immigrants coming into the country here. A medical attendant is checking the heart rate and giving you a cursory look over. This guy over here, which is right there, it looks like he needs to do a few push-ups, I believe, but I shouldn't be talking about that. And we also have like clothing services. It's like the thrift store, something on that order there that will provide clothing, used clothing to these immigrants coming in to the city, just to help you get on your way. And anyway, and that's about enough of that here, folks. So let's go back to our camera here, and we'll pick it up. Like I said, I have a lot of visuals for you today. Try not to wear you out too much with that. All right, so that's immigration here. Let's see here. Where are we here, folks? All right, so let's take a look at this now. Often we would see in these cities in America, it would be predominantly immigrant. Now, I threw this out to you just to give you an example. Period of time we're talking about here, London was 94% English. London, England, 94% English. It is not that way today. If you go to London today, you'll find that it's just a hodgepodge of just worldly groups there, you know, and London has a mess on its hands here, my friends. Same thing is true with Paris. You would think that if you go to Paris, you would find 100% French, and it's not that way at all. There are many, many nationalities there. London and Paris, they open their borders, and by golly, they're paying for it too. All righty, so Chicago was 87%. Chicago was 87% immigrant. And that is incredible here, folks. Looking at some of the other cities, New York was 80% immigrant, you know, mostly Irish, mostly Germans. Milwaukee, 84%. Immigrants. Detroit, if you can't read my writing there, Detroit, 84% immigrant here. New York had more Irish than Dublin, Ireland. Dublin, Ireland is the largest city in Ireland. And New York had more Irish than actually the capital city of Ireland did, the Republic of Ireland. New York had more Germans than Hamburg, Germany, a very large town in Germany. Chicago had more Poles than Warsaw, Poland. And that is just unbelievable that would happen, that could take place here. All right, we'll find that racial prejudices will emerge here. And I wrote that down here. And by the way, and for these immigrants that are coming into the country here, folks, usually arrived at about the age of 15 to 45 years of age. Some were married, many were not married here, you know, but you can imagine yourself coming into this country. You don't speak the language, and you don't dress like Americans here. You're not accustomed to American-type foods. I can remember when I went to Germany, I spent 2 years in Germany when I was in the Army, and I won't give you the years on that there, folks. I don't mind telling you that. It was 1972 to 1974. But, you know, I'd had 2 courses in German in college, you know, so I spoke the language a little bit. But at that time, very few Germans spoke English. You know, now they do. Everybody speaks English in Europe today, better English than you and I. Honest to goodness there. All right, it's more correct English anyway. But when I went to Germany, you know, I had to learn, you know, to like Wiener Schnitzel and Jaeger Schnitzel and Sauerbraten and Pommes frites and all those German foods. And as a matter of fact, I found them to be very, very good. I love those even to this day. I don't get enough of them. All right, but anyway, back to the camera we'll go here, folks. And Anyway, like I said, racial prejudice will emerge out of this, particularly towards the Irish individuals, toward Jewish people, toward Poles in particular there. Often it was difficult to find adequate housing, and the immigrants would be forced to live in tenement houses here. Triple deckers is what they were referred to as, just hastily built. Very crowded conditions here. I want to show you a couple of things here, and like I said, I have a lot of visuals for you. So we'll go back here. Typical scene that you would see in New York City here. Hasn't changed much, honestly. It hasn't, other than you don't have the push cart vendors like you see here, and the little wagons and that sort of thing. But typical scene that you would see in New York City. Trolley, I mentioned to you trolleys just a few minutes ago, provides an easement in the transportation here. All right, so anyway, that's just part of it too. All right, back we go here, folks, and let's see what else we have here. Always a risk for fires. And one of the worst fires that took place here was the Great Fire of Chicago. This took place on the 8th of October in 1871 after 14 weeks of no rain. 14 weeks of no rain. And supposedly the way this story began is when Miss O'Leary's cow, Daisy, kicked over the kerosene lantern and set the barn on fire. And anyway, it burned for 3 days there. It caused a vast amount of damage there. If you look in your textbook, I think there's a photograph. In fact, I know there is a photograph of the damage there from the Great Fire of Chicago. Now, another thing we're going to find here is in the cities will build up. And what I'm talking about, they will go up instead of moving out. Somebody explained this to me in 1870. The Equitable Building in New York has 7.5 stories to it. I've never been able to figure that out. How do you get 7.5 stories? Seems like it would be 7 stories, or you'd have 8 stories, but I don't see how you get 7.5 stories. Chicago had a skyscraper, so to speak, that was 10 floors. It was 10 stories high here. That was developed by Louis Sullivan, by the way. And as you might suspect, we're going to see an increase in the number of diseases that we have. Typhoid, cholera, close people disease is what I refer to them as. And if you remember from last semester, did we talk about crime? We never mentioned crime because we basically did not have too much crime in the United States, before the 1850s, 1860s anyway. All right, I wrote a name down here, urban bosses, and these urban bosses, these were people that these immigrants would look to, and they would provide you with a job, get you on your feet a little bit here, maybe find a place for your family to stay for a short period of time anyway. And of course, there's not supposed to be a free lunch in our society here, folks, so you have to return that favor to your urban boss. And what that means is that when you're able to vote, you'll vote the way that your urban boss wishes you to vote, which is Democrat. Because immigrants almost invariably voted Democrat. All right, we'll see some other things to improve here with the Brooklyn Bridge. Brooklyn Bridge, which was developed in 1883 by John Roebling. It cost $15 million here, but it would provide transportation back and forth, from Long Island over into Manhattan for many, many thousands of people on a daily basis, and now certainly on an annual basis. If you get a chance to go to New York, you can see this Brooklyn Bridge, by the way. All right, so that was that. Okay, let's see where we're going next here, folks. And a lot of material here today. How do people entertain themselves? And there were vast ways you could entertain yourselves. And I've got to go back to my camera here, folks, back to me, and I want to show you some ways in which they would entertain themselves. Up at Coney Island, and there is Coney Island, this area today, as a matter of fact. And here we had the Loop-de-Loop. I can't even imagine myself being on the Loop-de-Loop. You know what I'm talking about. You can get a pretty good idea with that. We also had this crazy device here, and what happens here is that the rider and horse have been on the ramp. Where's the ramp here? The rider and horse have been on the ramp just a few seconds ago, and they went to the top here, and there was a platform at the top. You can see it's been released now, and then once the rider and horse, the platform is released and it goes down. We understand gravity, and then rider and horse go straight down here into a swimming pool. That's huge fun. Huge fun. I can't even imagine watching that. Here's another exciting form of entertainment for people of those times. Just a few seconds ago, one railroad locomotive was down the tracks a quarter of a mile to the left, and the other railroad locomotive was down the tracks to the right a quarter of a mile. And everybody watches this as the two railroad locomotives just gather steam, gain steam, and just go nose to nose with each other here. Huge fun, don't you think so? Anyway, so that's entertainment of that period of time here. Alrighty, so let's talk about a few other things related to entertainment, and are things that change, and then we'll get into some entertainment. And it was during this time that we're going to see tin cans to develop. Tin cans, foods can now be preserved. We had refrigerated rail cars, so this means that we can now transport goods, food items, and perishable items, and transport them across the country, and they would not spoil along the way. In the 1870s, it's actually a grocery store. It was called the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. People refer to them as A&P grocery stores. And we had A&P grocery stores here in Jasper, Alabama. My friends, in fact, when I was on my workout this morning, went right by the old A&P. We don't have A&P in the South. There's a few A&Ps that are found in the North anyway. But if you understand where the industrial supply store is, it's on 5th Avenue and 18th Street. But that's where the old A&P store was. That's where my family bought their groceries there in that Son Humphreys. We also had F.W. Woolworths. F.W. Woolworths. At a later time, I'll show you a photograph of one in Jasper, Alabama. If you folks know where Johnny Brusco's is located, Johnny Brusco's, and I can't remember the name of the restaurant that's right next to it. But anyway, that's where the F.W. Woolworth store was. People referred to them as 5 and 10 cent stores. People called them dime stores. They departed this country. It's headquartered in London. They departed this country in the 1870s, and supposedly there were no Woolworths still in existence. But I want to defy that here, folks. I took this photograph in Keln, Germany in 2014 on January the 1st. And by golly, there is a Woolworths. So I know there's at least one Woolworths still in existence. I took that photograph just to prove that. All right, so anyway, Woolworths. And like I said, downtown Jasper. We also had stores which is known as Woolworths, and we had stores which are known as Sears Roebuck, Richard Sears and Roebuck, and that's what they called it. They referred to them as Sears and Roebuck, or Sears Roebuck. And at first it was mail order, and I can't even imagine doing that today. You got to remember, back in those times here, we did not have, internet, so you couldn't just order online. But Sears Roebuck, and it was always an amazing thing. At the start of the year, you would get a Sears Roebuck catalog. It was about 4 inches thick, and a number of pages devoted to where you could fill out the blanks there on what items you wanted and mail that in. And about 3 weeks later, after your check cleared, you would get your materials through the mail. Department stores emerged during this period of time. Different than we have today, by and large here, but certainly in the South. But the way these department stores went, they went up, such as this, and it had first floor. The first floor would be dedicated to, children's clothing. The second floor here would be ladies' wear. Third floor here would be men's wear. Sporting goods would be on the fourth floor. Fifth floor would be household appliances, or whatever the case was there. And we don't see that too very often today. I can remember when they had department stores of that type in Birmingham. And like I said, most of them today are like Belk and Jasper, in which you still have the departments, but it's spread out. It's spread out in a linear fashion rather than in an upward fashion. All right, but some of these are very popular stores that emerged here with Marshall Field in Chicago, Macy's out of New York, Wanamaker's out of Philadelphia, Abraham and Strauss out of Brooklyn, New York, Jordan, Marsh, and Filene's out of Boston, and I put a little Boston pronunciation, Boston. All right, and some of these are still in existence today, some have not done so well, and they're no longer in existence. All right, so let's go into sports, another form of entertainment here. At our national pastime at that during this period, say the 1860s, 1870s anyway, was baseball. Now, baseball originated as a game which was called rounders, and it was similar to cricket. I wrote a name for you there. baseball was developed not by Abner Doubleday, but baseball was developed in the 1840s by Alexander Cartwright. Let me show you what it looked like here. And this was a photograph taken from that period of time, showing you a Rounders team. Notice the bat there, which is more like a mallet than anything else. The object was to allow the striker, the hitter, to hit the ball. Like I said, played similar to cricket today. Cricket's always fun to watch. We don't see it in our country very often, but if you spend any time in Ireland or England or Barbados, places such as that, down to St. Thomas, St. John's, down in the Caribbean, it's very, very popular there. And always kind of fun to watch, as a matter of fact, here. Okay, so let's see if I can find another likeness here about Rounders. And it's baseball. It's making a comeback here, by the way. Here we have, this is a Smithsonian magazine. People today will dress in period-type uniforms. There's no gloves that are worn. Well, they tell you no gloves. They have like small gloves that are skin-colored. But the ball is hand-stitched. If it's hit out into the woods, the game stops and everybody goes out and searches for the ball. But anyway, it's making a comeback, not in the South, but it is in the North. All right, we also had football, which will appear here. And let's see if I can find a photograph here of a early football game. I think this is Cornell. I believe it is. Cornell's playing in Rochester, I believe it is. And anyway, at first, when the teams got together, they would have as many as 25 players on the field at one time. I'm going to take this down and go back to the camera here, folks. All right. And did I write the name football out here? And I did, but I actually got a little bit behind here. And anyway, I'll continue with football for just a second. And the first football game that actually took place intercollegiately was in 1869. It was against Princeton and Rutgers. The game had a different scoring system than what we have today, but Princeton lost that game to Rutgers 6-4. All righty, so anyway, I want to go back to baseball a few seconds because I left this out a second ago anyway. The first professional baseball team was out of Cincinnati Red Stockings. Cincinnati Red Stockings were organized in 1869, by the way. The National League was created in 1876. I think it had 8 teams associated with it. During those times, the average player was paid $800 a year. And if you were a star players garnered about $1,500 a year. By 1901, the American League was formed. And, of course, anytime you form, the American League had been a minor league, by the way. And anytime you form a American League and you have a National League, obviously you're going to have a World Series. And the first World Series took place in 1903 between the Boston Americans and the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates were heavily, heavily favored. And this was the best out of 9 games. At that time, anyway, it was best out of 9 games. And the Pirates jumped out and had 3 games to 0. And then the Boston Americans rallied and won the next 4 games and won the World Series with that. All right, back to football we go here, folks. In 1896, the Western Conference was formed by Amos Alonzo Stagg. This is referred to as the Big Ten. And by 1910, the National College Athletic Association was created, and this was established rules of eligibility. You could only have 11 players on the field from each team at the same time. Just happened to look down here, trying to find some other things here. Here's a photograph of one of the early football games. Let's see if I can make this a little bit better, and I cannot. It's a dark background anyway, but just showing you photographs of that time. Notice there are no sissy pads here, so people just went out and just beat each other up. In 1905, there was 18 college football players that were killed in a single season, and the President of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt, called the football officials together, the coaches together, and he told them, he said, football is on trial. Because I believe in the game, I want to do all I can to save it, and so I've called you all down here to see whether you won't all agree to abide by both the letter and the spirit of the rules. That will help. And through this, we're going to see the adding of pads and helmets, to protect those players a little bit. Okay, so anyway, football will survive that. And let's move on here, folks, and see what other forms of entertainment we have. In 1891, Dr. James Naismith developed the game of basketball. He was a Canadian, by the way, and he was at a YMCA in Springfield, Massachusetts, which, by the way, in Springfield, that's where you find the Basketball Hall of Fame to this very day. And at first, the game was no more than just nailing a couple of peach baskets to the side of a building and just trying to throw a round ball through it. Other forms of entertainment that we had was boxing with one of the most famous ones was John L. Sullivan, 1882, was a world heavyweight champion here, and here he is right there. John L. Sullivan here. And anyway, hard punching guy, hard drinking guy too, as a matter of fact, with that. And anyway, he was challenged in 1892. The Boston Strongboy was challenged by Gentleman Jim Corbett. And both these guys were white guys, by the way. And Gentleman Jim Corbett won that world championship, or I should say the heavyweight championship. Okay, in 1901, it was actually 1908. I'm sorry about that. And Jack Johnson, who was a black man, won the heavyweight boxing championship, and this was done so here. This was done so here in 1908. Here's what he looks like here. Jack Johnson. He had gold teeth, by the way, and gold-plated teeth. And immediately this fell into dispopularity here. First of all, he was a black man. He was African-American, and he defeated a white individual, so that didn't set well with the American public. In 1908, it didn't help matters that he also had white girlfriends, and they were actually prostitutes. And he ended up carrying those prostitutes, or one of them anyway, across the state line, which was a violation of the Mann Act, and he was arrested. He was arrested for that. All right, so anyway, that was just American prejudice of that period of time anyway. Liked to drink, liked to party, liked fast sport cars, and that led to his undoing as he was killed in a hot rodding, in the 1940s anyway. All right, so that was Jack Johnson. He entered the news a couple of years ago. This article I'm going to show you here was in May 2018, and Jack Johnson here was pardoned by President Trump here, 72 years after the champ's death there. Okay, so anyway, and that was Jack Johnson. All right, let's move right along and see what else we have here, folks. We'll go back to where we are on our camera. This was a time of the age of fitness. People actually tried to take care of themselves, unlike today. But it was an age of fitness. People played golf, tennis, bicycling, croquet. I don't think that's very demanding anyway. Track and field, running, that's what I'm talking about. Crew, that is rowing, swimming. Anyway, horse racing was popular at that time, It was an age of fitness. It honestly was. The President of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt, encouraged people to get out and exercise and take care of yourselves. Popular songs during this period of time, popular songwriters. Was that a George M. Cohen? Perhaps you've heard of some of these songs. Yankee Doodle Dandy, Over There, You're a Grand Old Flag, Irving Berlin with Alexander's Ragtime Band, God Bless America. All right, vaudeville was a very, very popular form of entertainment, and we saw this around the Civil War period of times, where mostly the entertainers were white entertainers that were in blackface, and they darkened their skin to make them appear as if they were African Americans. And here during the vaudevillian times here, it was kind of a mixture. You had whites, you had blacks, and many of the vaudevillians were actually African Americans. Al Jolson, one of the best known of that period of time, was actually a white man. He was from Russia, an amazing entertainer, but he would perform in blackface. You can go on YouTube if you wish to do so. I'm not going to put it out there for you, but you can go on YouTube if you wish to do so and just click in Al Jolson. You can see him performing, singing his songs of Mammy and Swanee. Anyway, he's an interesting entertainer there. I'll talk about him again later when we get to the talkie movies. Thomas Edison developed the phonograph. He also developed motion pictures. An amazing inventor there, Thomas Edison. All right, let's move on here. Popular magazines of this period of time and newspapers, particularly those that are produced by these two individuals. William Randolph Hearst, who was a a very, very wealthy individual, by the way. He controlled 9 newspapers, 2 magazines. If you go to California in the Big Sur region, you can see the Hearst Castle, which is present there. Joseph Pulitzer. Did I spell that right? All right. Okay, Pulitzer. And anyway, yellow journalism, bold, sensationalistic headlines designed for the reader of just average intelligence. Dime novels were very popular at that time. 1899, popular magazines, Ladies' Home Journal. I can remember it like yesterday, not in 1899, that we always had in my household, Ladies' Home Journal. Harper's Magazine, Atlantic Monthly. People were designated, and honest to goodness, in society, people were designated as highbrows and lowbrows. Now, highbrows are intelligent, educated individuals. Lowbrows are those individuals that have not had any schooling. They're not educated individuals. And I asked my mother about this once. My mother was born in the 1920s, 1924. And I said, Mother, have you ever heard of the highbrows and lowbrows? And her response was, you left out one, son. We had people that were no brows. And those were people that were even less educated than the lowbrows that had no education whatsoever. You have to figure that one out. Popular writers of that period of time, we had Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, Kate Chopin. One of my favorites, I love this individual here. We're looking around for a couple of his books here. Is that Stephen Crane. Stephen Crane, who wrote this book here, The Red Badge of Courage. I like that book. It's easy reading. It was written in 1895, by the way, and it describes the life of a soldier in the Northern Army during the Civil War. But he also wrote The Monster, The Bride Comes to Yellow Sky, Maggie, A Girl in the Streets, The Open Boat. Those are all wonderful reads here. Theodore Dreiser was another one. Theodore Dreiser was Sister Carrie. One of my favorite individuals was that Sinclair Lewis. And Sinclair Lewis wrote this book here in 1906 called The Jungle. And I'm going to tell you, good folks, I am a prolific reader. I read everything. And of all the books I've read in my life, this ranks in the top 10. I love this book here, The Jungle. I seldom have a student that's actually read this book. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. If you want to know about immigrant life in America around the time frame that we've been talking about, it's actually an exposure of the abuses in the meatpacking industry, and we'll bring that up again at a later time here. Alrighty, the last 2 chapters are devoted to socialism, so if you're like me and you're not in the frame of mind to study about socialism, stop the book as you get to the final 2 chapters here. One of my favorite writers of this period was Jack London. I love Jack London. He wrote this book here, The Call of the Wild. There it is here. And also wrote, this is one of my top 10 favorite books too, The Sea Wolf by Jack London. Show you a likeness here of Jack London. Here he is right here. This shows you the latest in swimwear. You know, around, does it give a date right there? It does not. It's about 1905, something like that anyway. That's Jack London in this really revealing swimsuit here. He is in black, and that is his wife there in the white. But anyway, that's Jack London. If you get a chance to go out to Oakland, California here, folks, I don't recommend that you do that, but it's kind of a dangerous place. But if you go there, be sure and stop at Hein Ho's First and Last Chance Saloon, and that's where Jack London would do his writing there, and he would sit there and drink beer and write. And it's an interesting place to visit there. I was looking around my office here. I've got a photograph of me sitting right there in the very stool, the bar stool, in which Jack London wrote The Sea Wolf. All right, so anyway, it's kind of interesting there with Jack London. And let's see who else we might have here, folks, here. All right, we'll move right along here. Okay, so we are running out of time, so we need to move along. Okay, education during this time here. For education, we had 1860, there were 100 high schools. By 1900, there were 6,000 high schools. 1914, 12,000 high schools. So anyway, and actually 31 states had a compulsory school attendance requirement. And I'm going to share some photographs with you, showing you some photographs of early school. If you were in class now, I would ask you, how many of you are going into education? Education is a wonderful profession, by the way. And I would ask the second question, how many of you are going into elementary education? So you imagine this, you know, if you're turning the century America 1900, this would be your one-room school, maybe two two-room school, and you will be the school teacher, like this lady is standing next to the steps there, and you may have children of all ages. I'm talking about 6 to 12 or 6 to 15, and it will be your responsibility to educate those children. All right, another photograph here showing you a typical classroom. If we were in the class here, folks, face to face, you know, I would read the requirements, and the requirement for you is right here. And anyway, it would be difficult, I promise you, for you folks to even work that out today. You can look at the ages of the children here, which are probably about 9, 10 years of age. All right. And anyway, here's a good way to lose your job today here, folks. Stand your children up at attention, so to speak, and have them salute the flag of the United States here. You'll probably be pink slipped by 3 o'clock this afternoon. Isn't that a shame? Anyway, typical high school, inside of a high school classroom here in turn of the century America. All right, so anyway, that's education for us. All right, let's go back here to our camera and see where we are here, folks. Now, one interesting school that developed out of this was a school which is called the Indian School. And this school is established in 1879, was a Carlisle Indian Industrial School. And it's still there today. It's not an Indian school, but it is now the site of the United States Army War College. I had 2 years of wonderful experience. I assigned to Carlisle Barracks at an Army War College. Here's a brochure that deals with this, you know. It's kind of interesting there, folks. You can actually go out to the football field or to the running track, where probably many consider to be the greatest athlete in the history of the United States, where he went to school there as an Indian. He was a Sauk Indian. Here he is right here. If you don't recognize this guy, his name is Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe. And you find statues of him there. He was, like I said, a Sauk Indian, track star, a football star, and his football team, which was actually a high school team, and I forget which year it is. I've already put my book up here. It only lost one game, and they played colleges, you know, and that was with Jim Thorpe as their star running back there. Okay, so anyway, that's kind of interesting. All right, let's see here. As we move right along here, we need to start wrapping things up. For many individuals in our country that were wealthy, they would donate huge sums of money to perpetuate their family names. In other words, I'll give you $1 million to this school if you'll name your school after me. You probably figured it out by now. Vanderbilt, this was Commodore Vanderbilt, donated $1 million, you know, to establish Vanderbilt. Johns Hopkins, same thing. We had Duke University, that was established by James Buchanan Duke in honor of his father, I believe it was anyway. Washington Duke created Duke University. If you go there today, you'll find a huge statue there of James Buchanan Duke. He's smoking a cigar, by the way, and with the American Tobacco Company. We had Paul Tulane, and to establish a medical school at Tulane. Jane and Leland Stanford to perpetuate the memory of their son who died in Stanford. University of Chicago. Much money was donated by John D. Rockefeller. Ezra Cornell for Cornell. Carnegie Mellon University, Andrew Carnegie. And we also had many schools at this time, several schools at this time, that were primarily for women. Vassar, Wells, Wellesley, Smith, Bryn Mawr, and by the way, most of these are now co-ed, but originally they were all female. Goucher, Mount Holyoke, Barnard, Radcliffe. These are called the Seven Sisters, by the way. All right. Now, as we start moving into our next chapter here, folks, we're going to also see American imperialism. And what I mean, America is going to spread its territorial boundaries even further than coast to coast. We all remember Manifest Destiny. We've talked about that before. But America has spread all the way across the continent. Now, for America to undergo imperialism or to continue to spread our boundaries, this means that we have to go abroad. Now, who's behind this? Well, we had Protestant missionaries, for example. Let's bring Christianity to China. Let's take Christianity to other areas. We also had other individuals there, other than the Protestant missionaries. We had American businessmen like I.M. Singer. I.M. Singer sells sewing machines to places such as China here. And then we also had individuals that were just imperialists, like Teddy Roosevelt. These are the jingoists. Let's just take over another country just because we can. just because we can't do that. So what we're going to do here, folks, I'm going to stop for the time being, but when we come back with our next lecture, we're going to go into American imperialism, and we're going to lay claim to other parts of the world. And what better place to start than that of Hawaii? All right, so that's in front of us here, folks. All right, thank you for your attention here, folks. Stay up with this material. It's going to mount up on you very, very quickly. Thank you.